Welcome to video 16 on the series Navigating Business Decisions. This is a compilation of videos where I deep dive into the 64-page report on a survey and study that was conducted in conjunction with students at Kent State University. We provided a survey mechanism to business leaders in Northeast Ohio. We heard back from them and then compiled that data and are presenting what we found to you today. If you'd like to see the entire survey or a 2-page summary, you can visit my website, laconticonsulting.com/ohio-survey and download them there. Today, we are going to review some future outlooks and themes that we found throughout the survey. And these are some takeaways based on the interviews that I conducted with 7 different leaders who were willing to share additional information beyond just the survey itself. So in these in-depth interviews, I was able to ask additional questions to clarify their answers, to find out more about their motivations, some of their goals for their business, and also identify some challenges and struggles that they may not have actually shared in depth in the survey itself, because it was limited to just a certain amount of space and a format that we were able to collect with a broader amount of data. So these in-depth interviews provided a lot more insights into how business owners and leaders might think and how they might choose to do things in the context of their daily decision making. So some themes that we found: first of all, innovation isn't optional, it's survival. This was a theme that came up quite a bit because of rapid advancements in technology with the changes that are happening everywhere. It's very difficult to just accept that things are going to continue the way they are. It would be nice, but it's just not a reality. So many business owners are forced to make choices about how to integrate technology or to adapt to new areas of the market that they may not be very comfortable with or which they're really not happy about. This became a very interesting topic that came up several times in the discussions and also in the survey results on how to decide what to invest in. Here's a quote from a manufacturing owner: "We're developing a new product that will likely cannibalize our existing line. Moving forward before competitors is essential to staying ahead in the market." This is a theme that we talked about in previous videos about cannibalizing or potentially harming certain areas of your business by increasing benefits to other areas. And this is something that we heard from several owners when they provided their feedback. Number 2 on the themes that we heard from leaders: growth doesn't always mean bigger. I definitely have heard from a lot of business owners in my consulting work that they would rather not grow their business if it could risk harming the current way that business is being done. If it puts too much stress on the current employees and potentially burn them out even more, if it could create some additional backlogs in their orders, if it makes it more difficult to keep quality control high. I mean, there's all sorts of downsides to growing without checks and balances and without a really good idea of how to enhance the company as a whole. So some owners are choosing to avoid rapid expansion. And instead of only seeking to grow, I really agree with this concept of mastering the niche that they have identified as being of most worth in the market that they're serving, and then perfecting the quality. Smaller and deliberate growth can result in a stronger competitive advantage. And when you prioritize your ability to refine that special sauce that you can create and that stands out in the market, as the blue ocean strategy concept suggests, it can actually enhance your ability to grow in a more sustainable way over time. So success does not need to come at the cost of cutting your quality or reducing the amount of benefit that you provide to your customers. You can actually have a better positioning for growth over time and financial gain if you focus more on sustainability, meaning the ability to continue to grow in a healthy way throughout the next several years instead of just trying to rapidly grow so that you are positioned for sale. I've actually seen several companies where the leadership team decides that they want to grow very quickly in order to position the company for a high valuation when they position it for sale. And in the process of doing this, they actually do what we just mentioned earlier. They cannibalize existing products. They sometimes cut corners. They may have fractures in relationships with other leaders. Sometimes they can also harm their current customer base in order to try to push that envelope and create so much growth that it's almost at the cost of what they've accomplished up to that point. I know many owners are also very cautious about passing the torch of their leadership on to others who may not see the same vision or may not have the same goals, because watching the business that you've created from the ground up get torn apart by the next person who you've handed it off to is pretty heartbreaking. And sometimes that risk is not worth doing. Sometimes it's more painful to watch that happen than it is just to stay in control. And even if the company is decreasing in value over time, at least you're not losing all that momentum and growth to someone who's actually hurting the company. Here's another quote from a manufacturing service owner. We're investing in manpower even during economic slowdowns to position ourselves for future growth. The third takeaway from these interviews is debt is not a badge of honor. Yes, debt is a very helpful tool. And yes, funding can definitely help to create more growth, rapid growth, and position you for a situation that you may not be able to achieve otherwise. I definitely understand that. However, being cautious with the finances that you have already and choosing to be as proactive in growing in ways other than additional debt can result in a slower but sustainable and healthy growth approach without the additional burden of those debt payments. I've definitely seen a lot of business owners who talk about the mental load of debt and of not having full control of their company because they've given a portion away in an equity handoff. There's just so many different considerations for how you want to proceed as the business owner. I definitely advocate and suggest that reducing the amount of debt in a company generally results in happier and more well-adjusted owners who can then make choices that align with their personal goals. Debt, on the other hand, can become such a burden that it really can ruin people's lives. It can ruin your ability to feel like you have control of your company. It can actually stagnate the growth that you were capable of because now that debt payment is priority above everything else. You put a real strain on relationships with the business and also reduce the valuation because if you have a debt load that counts against the total equity of the business. So the financial strength that you can get from choosing to reduce the amount of debt you have or you trying to be debt free can be a really different approach to what some companies are doing or might tell you how to grow quickly. You need to get in a lot of debt and take high risks. But this growth at all costs mentality can be really dangerous. So I definitely caution business owners who are thinking about this to look at the whole picture and the long term. And I certainly celebrate with business owners who've chosen to stay debt free in how much more they're able to accomplish and how much more freeing it feels to not have any debt load at all and own their company outright. Fourth, leadership isn't about control, it's about trust. I can see a shift happening in leadership philosophies when it comes to how to manage the next generations. And I talked several times in this report about generational differences and how to motivate younger people, especially in how to attract them to work in your company and then expecting them to align with the vision that you might have can take some adjusting if the goals of those employees does not align with the culture that you're providing through your business. Today's leaders recognize that building trust with their team is the real route to long-term success. Owners who can rely on people to make decisions are far more likely to recognize the importance of innovation, loyalty, and growth. And I definitely see that creating a work environment that's more effective for bridging the gap between those generational differences of perhaps leaders who just want to micromanage or expect almost like robotic actions from their staff compared to leaders who are more open-minded and welcoming of some innovation, even if it's not necessarily what they would choose, but which could potentially help their business to improve. those are two different ways of looking at a business, and it really is more a matter of how you want to position for the most effective way to get to your goals. So if that means adjusting your leadership style a bit and trusting your employees to provide feedback that could be useful, then that really could open up a lot of doors. A fifth lesson that we learned was invest in people, not just profits. I think a lot of business owners really want to do this, and most of them think they are doing this. However, when you look at how a company may be operating or what their rate of turnover is, the number of employees that join and then quit or leave or transfer out within just a few weeks or months, that can say a lot about how a company is actually running, the priorities that the owner and leadership team actually have. It is one thing to say that you invest in your people, you want the best for your people, and profit is secondary. And it's another to actually ask employees to be honest and upfront without any penalty and find out that they do not feel that way. The fact that so many companies are reviewed poorly on social media sites like Glassdoor and Yelp and other sites where you can provide honest feedback, Reddit, there are so many different websites where you can actually see very honest, sometimes scathing information about how the company is operating. This, to me, says a lot about how there's potentially a culture difference that can be reshaped. It can be adjusted. The key here is that the owners are willing to hear feedback from employees before they leave and then choose what to do with that information. If your goal as a company is to have a priority on making sure your employees are given access to information they need to make their job better, that they are included in strategic decisions, that you really do want to hear their inputs before you make changes that could affect their role in the company, then that can create more opportunity for employees to engage, and that most likely will result in them staying for longer. It is a really fine line, though, between giving too much control to people who really cannot manage that control, and on the other side, just expecting behavior that most employees are not going to want to put up with such as not having any flexibility in their schedule. That's becoming a really big problem for Gen Z employees, especially, that they want a lot of flexibility and they will not work at a place that doesn't offer that. So owners who prioritize resilience, skills development will see a return on investment of more than just money. If you invest in your workforce, you can also build a foundation that goes far beyond financial success. You will also potentially see many other effects on your community and on relationship building and on potentially even business growth, additional types of business that you could be running, maybe collaborations with employees who move on and start their own companies, and then you can collaborate with them. There's just so many really great ways that this can benefit you beyond just making money. Then sixth, legacy is messier than you think. Family businesses traditionally do not have a very good rate of third or fourth generation longevity. The most common reason is the expectations that the older generations have when they pass the business on, and the type of management style that those younger generations might have just doesn't align with the goals and style of older parent, grandparent level owners. One very important part of this is a very difficult handoff that must happen at some point for that person to hand the control of how the business is running to family members who they may not fully trust. So this is so much more than just the day-to-day operations of the business, and even more than the strategic plan for how the business will operate. There are components of this that remain unaddressed. I think even in some successful handoffs, there are still issues that remain within the communication between the generations, between family members, expectations that aren't met, guilt and shame, and it's very messy. And there can be emotional landmines. There can be promises that grandpa made 15 years ago that were definitely not kept once he passed away, and now the father is in charge and the grandchildren don't have what they were expecting from the business. There are painful decisions about whether you should employ your children in the business, whether they are the best qualified candidates for the certain roles that are needed. Very nuanced and difficult to manage. If you don't peel off some of the layers of these difficulties ahead of time. So sometimes the next generation is not ready. They're not prepared. They haven't had the training. They're not emotionally ready. They may not be capable of running the business in a way that is best. So these decisions are very difficult, and every owner really has to make these choices at some point anyway, how they will be stepping away. They will be leaving one way or another. We don't live forever. And the best thing is to plan ahead. And we found out through this study that succession planning as well as crisis management planning are very important aspects that often are ignored, or we tend to avoid discussions and decisions that are painful, especially if we don't understand them. So these are topics that can be very difficult to understand and to predict how they will conclude. I suggest that these conversations are even more important to have as early as possible so that you can get all of the expectations out in the open and that everyone can kind of say their piece and decide how they want to proceed, and that no one feels pushed to do something that they're not comfortable with or forced to do something that they aren't qualified to do out of guilt, or that there is any confusion about how the business can continue operating. So again, not fun conversations, but sometimes those painful conversations can result in a really good outcome that has a much better chance of succeeding long term. Business can survive beyond the owner's involvement if they decide how and when to let it go. And this is the best way to preserve a lasting legacy, because ultimately it's about a lot more than just money. It is about the brand and the legacy of that owner and how they've made an impact in their community and what kind of history they've provided, what kind of future the business is going to have. There are a lot of different aspects to this, and not just about who's running the business day to day, but also whether that legacy can continue on. Successful family businesses have found out how to do this in a very effective way. Seventh, the price of success can be too high. It's not always worth it to work so much that you get trapped. We did see this theme come in several conversations as well as through the data itself from the survey mechanism. When you sacrifice your health, relationships with your family, your own personal mental burnout, and guilt over what you've lost or what you've given up in exchange for what you achieve through your business, that can be a really frustrating and awful realization, especially if it becomes almost too late to do anything about it. So these chasing the dream concept, it becomes kind of a reality, especially for business owners who are really dedicated, and that can result in a very successful business. But how do you define success? A lot of business owners I talk to start redefining that as they have children or grandchildren, as they decide that maybe they want to step back, but they kind of painted themselves in a corner of controlling a business that requires them to be part of it all the time. So if they step away, the business starts to fail. And that handoff can be very difficult. It has a lot to do with legacy, but also to do with the concept of what's next. What is your identity beyond the business? So lasting success is not just about the numbers. It's about knowing when to step back and prioritizing a healthy balance between work and life. As I've said before, business only has value if it can be transferred to someone else. And that process of deciding how to transfer it really should be done well ahead of the actual finality of a health issue or a death or a family emergency or some other type of crisis. It really should be a process that's done well before the owner is actually going to step away and hand the business to someone else to run. So I hope these were helpful. Again, the 7 takeaways are: innovation is not optional, it's survival. Growth doesn't always mean bigger. Debt is not a badge of honor. Leadership is not about control, it's about trust. Invest in people, not just profits. Legacy is messier than you think. The price of success can be too high. Thanks again for checking out this video. If you want to find the whole report, you can go to laconticonsulting.com. If you like this content, subscribe, like, and share this video, and leave a comment if you have any questions about this.